Okay, so I am Louis Dobbin, and I am the unseen mastermind behind Consortium of Genius and also a producer for a lot of bands around here.
Okay. And what are you doing musically for Consortium of Genius?
In Consortium of Genius, I write much of the music. I front the band as my alter ego, Dr. Pinkerton. I program DrumBot, so I do all the drums. And traditionally, I've done most of the keyboards too, although right now we have a keyboardist.
Okay. In the early days, way back before any of this, what was drawing you towards music? How did you realize that this is something that you really wanted to be involved with?
Okay, so coming up, both of my parents were into music. Neither one was a musician.
Okay.
But my dad had a great record collection and was a hi-fi buff. And so he introduced me to that love of equipment and collecting records.
Okay.
And Mom would sing to my brother and I and encourage us to actually make up our own songs.
Okay.
And that's probably how that got started.
At what age are we talking?
Like 2, 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a cassette tape of us doing that.
Nice. And so you started to formulate your own lyrics as a child?
I guess so, but I never really got interested in songwriting until much later, like in my 20s. Okay, so in high school, my buddy Kirk and I, and this is a fellow named Kirk Madison,
Okay.
whom I started the band with, started the COG with in the late 80s. We were starting to realize, what you could do with these various instruments and just things that were available at local electronic stores like Radio Shack equipment.
Yes.
We didn't know that there was such a thing as, pro-level equipment. I was dimly aware of it because my cousins were all into music. And so when I visited their home in Baton Rouge, I would see rows of amps, custom mostly, lining the walls, but I never got to see them actually play music.
Yeah.
And the most I got was hand-me-down 45s from them, and I assembled a giant collection of 45s.
Okay.
But I didn't know you could actually buy music equipment until Kirk and I started getting equipment just from like the Sears catalog or
Sure.
or whatnot. Starting off with like a Casio synthesizer and a cheap Sears guitar, which is up on that wall over there.
Nice. You still got it, huh?
Yeah, so we like kept some of the original stuff from,
Yeah.
The genesis of the band from the late 80s. And we were doing what we could, just screwing around with hi-fi equipment. Like, we didn't know how you made distortion to make a guitar sing, to make a guitar sound like the guitars on MTV sounded.
Yeah.
So we would take the guitar and jack it into a cassette deck and turn it all the way up.
Right. So
and then
clipped.
take that cassette deck and run it into another cassette deck and turn that all the way up and get gain that way.
Nice.
And try to make distorted sounds. And we tried to make the loudest sound we could, just anything to experiment on sounds and music. And between that and a Casio SK1, little mini sampler that they had out in 1987,
Yeah.
we made all these experimental tapes. At some point, I got myself a reel-to-reel recorder
Okay.
and learned how you did the tape echo effect by feeding the playhead back into the record head. And that was our first reverb kind of sound effect. And, I got obsessed with sound effects, bought a reverb unit from Radio Shack. I bought anything I could, like a mixer.
Yeah.
But I still didn't know how you went about doing it right until I bought out of the paper a PV mixing board, and that was a big 12-channel, big for me at the time.
Sure.
And from there got a Roland TR-707 drum machine, and then an Ensoniq keyboard, which I still have, and started making primitive like electronic music.
Okay.
And so we'd mess around with that and guitar and try to tape stuff like sequenced on the keyboard and tape the guitar in real time.
What was the overall aim? Was it the electronics application to music, or was it for you to make something that nobody else could make?
Yeah, it was just open creativity. It was just, it was either just crazy music or cracking each other up. That was another big part of it. Making each other laugh. Like, it was almost like a challenge,
Yeah.
just to make just stupid nonsense music that would crack up your partner in the band.
Yeah.
And so that's when we started writing Cog music. And like all the early Cog stuff was written that way. And we actually did pull together a band with me on drums, with a hand-me-down drum set from Kirk's brother, an old Sonar kit, which no longer exists. And, whatever I could use to record at the time, which was very primitive. We didn't have a 4-track. We had modified cassette decks. We had that reel-to-reel I talked about, which was just a home reel-to-reel. It wasn't a dubbing deck. Like you couldn't overdub tracks.
Gotcha.
I had various VCRs which had stereo inputs, and just really primitive.
Yeah.
So we did what we could and wrote a bunch of really harsh, horrible sounding punk music, and yet really funny stuff. Like all the various things that we wrote usually had a very sardonic sense of humor behind them.
Sure.
So a lot of the original Cog stuff was written that way.
Yeah. What's ironic is people that had studio sessions with top labels were still trying to do things like that to be innovative.
Yeah.
But you were doing it not only to be innovative, but because you didn't have any other way to do it.
No, we didn't have any budget or really any idea how it was supposed to be done.
Yeah. So when it came to... So it was just for a laugh, just to see what you could make. When it came to... I guess any earmarks for progress for you? I mean, it's not really goal-oriented.
No,
so it's hard
but things
to say.
did evolve, like on their own. I started working for an electronics company doing installations of sound systems and fire alarms and stuff like that. But the sound system part really interested me, and my boss was handing me off hand-me-down electronic parts like old microphones and stuff that they didn't need anymore.
Nice.
And I would take that home and integrate it into my setup. So it's like, oh, here's another mic I can put on the snare, or this might work on the kick drum, that kind of deal. And sort of eventually built up enough to start attempting to record other bands.
Okay.
And pretty soon, through work, I was able to buy an 8-track recorder. So I skipped the 4-track completely. I didn't take that step that most of my friends were taking of getting a 4-track cassette, like a Fostex or something.
Yeah.
Well, I got this Toa 8-track machine that you could actually record pretty high quality 8 tracks at once and do overdubs and everything you could ever want. And that's over there.
Nice.
It still works. And by this point, it's like the late 80s. By the early 90s, I was starting to record a lot of other bands, and I actually got some pretty good CDs made by hook or by crook on that machine.
Sure.
Even like starting to do advanced stuff like 8 tracks of instruments, bounce it down to 2 tracks, and then 6 tracks of vocals.
Yeah.
The Beatles style, doing reduction bounce downs.
It's funny that you say that, because that's what I was thinking about when I was talking about how it's ironic, because people had all of these access to all of these things were still trying to do what you were doing. You know? And they were innovators too. Like I believe it was White Album. They were running 4 of those machines together, 4 tracks. And so that's awesome. Were you aware of anybody else doing anything else like this, professionally or otherwise?
Yeah, I was aware of all the professional stuff. Through work, I was able to get like subscriptions to those free industry mags like Mix and Sound and Communications and stuff like that. And so I was becoming very aware of the big world of audio and music recording. And I was also starting to work with live bands too. In the late 80s, I hooked up with a local prog rock band called Soul Relier, which was later renamed Eden. And became very good friends with those guys, but also started having to become much, much better at this stuff because first off, they wanted high quality recordings, but also, they had, well, keyboards, bass, drums, a large drum set, guitar, and everybody was singing.
Gotcha.
So I had to learn how to make monitoring happen on a stage where, you had like 4 open microphones and not feedback, and it was much more difficult back then.
Well, wait, your assistance was for recording or for live shows?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Both.
Right.
Yeah, I was starting to work with them, and then I met at UNO. I was attending UNO. I met the lead singer from the metal band Dead Rebecca and fell in with them and started working with them, doing their recordings and their live shows. And then after that, the band Garage Mahal. And so I had like 3 bands I was working with very steadily, all of which were very talented bands. And I learned a lot from each one of those groups and was using the same techniques and the same equipment on all those bands. And we got a lot done. And, some of those bands were more prolific than others in terms of putting out recordings. Like with Soul Relier / Eden, we recorded and recorded and recorded, and they never really published an album proper.
Wow.
We had a demo.
Yeah.
And the demo just kept getting longer and longer and longer
Right.
until it was like an hour long. And I would take the multi-track deck out to live shows and multi-track the live shows and take them back and mix them at home and get pretty good results.
Yeah.
I was really surprised by how good you could get if you had, a way to remix.
Sure.
And so presently, by the year 1993 or so, by this point, I was starting to, after a normal recording session, sort of keep the guest musician, whoever it was, overdubbing guitar or putting down a bass line or whatever. I would keep them after their session and have them lay down tracks on my own music.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I've always been into cross-pollination of different music styles and reaching for people who are better than me or any of my friends were at playing.
Sure.
And so we'd have a lot of guest people coming in and dubbing guitar tracks or whatnot, or vocals or anything else onto these stupid songs that Kirk and I just kept writing.
Yeah.
By this point, he had gone off to the University of Texas in Austin, and he was still writing his own weird stuff on a homemade 4-tracker and his keyboard. And I, meanwhile, back here at home, had the 8-tracker. And, he would come into town occasionally, and we would put down tracks and whatever, I had come up with or he had come up with, make an official version. And so like I said, by 1993, I was at UNO, and I met the 2 people who would become my guitarist and bassist in the first version of Cog. So we were just hanging around, In fact, my guitarist was somebody that worked with me in sound services on campus.
Okay.
That was Keith Casbon. And, so he and I got a lot of chance to talk because we were both doing sound at UNO for various bands. And, he was in a real band. I had never been on stage before, really. But we put down a track with me and him and my old friend George, who was a next-door neighbor, just a couple of years older than me. And he played bass in his band that he had just as a goof off in the side his military service when he was stationed in Japan. And so we got together and put down a track called Die Barney Die, which was about killing Barney the dinosaur.
Okay.
And so we put that together, and that proved to be the impetus for putting together a cassette of the first version of the band, which was like studio only. It wasn't really a live version.
Did it have a name? The name
Yeah, Consortium of Genius. Oh, yeah.
Was already established?
Yeah, we came up with all that stuff right then and there.
Okay.
And we didn't know anything else about it. But let's see. Coming up with the stage version, I can pin that on seeing 2 different acts in around 1995. The two acts were the Upper Crust, which was a Boston-based hard rock band that dressed up as a bunch of aristocracy from like England, from like 18th century England. And they would stay in character and play this blistering hard rock in the style of AC/DC, and it was all about being an upper crust, upper class aristocrat. It was very silly and a lot of fun, and they would tour extensively, and one of them had somewhat of a connection here, and in fact, I learned later was a co-owner of the Saint Bar. So he was connected with a bunch of the local people anyway, and that's why they would come through here. But I would go to see them, or rather, I went to see them live at the Howling Wolf once, after having seen them on Conan O'Brien's show on TV, and being very impressed, that a band would be so insane. It struck me as being very much up my alley. And so when I saw them live, I was very taken by that. And then the same year, actually only just a month later, I saw another band called Emergency Broadcast Network, which, unlike the Upper Crust, kind of came and went. The Upper Crust hung around for years. They were active for like 15 years and put out 3 albums and did a pilot for MTV. They went through this entire cycle. And this other band was called Emergency Broadcast Network, and they were more of an industrial band. They were using a drum machine instead of a drummer. I remember that. And they were wearing lab coats on stage. And they had various pieces of technology on stage and a synchronized light show. And they had a video DJ who was using an Amiga computer to make real-time backgrounds for the band that were projected behind the band. And the lead singer was acting as some sort of, it was almost like he was preaching at us about the dangers of technology. At one point, he took what looked like an AK-47 and started shooting it into the air in time with the music. In a song about shooting guns. And another part of the show, he got into his podium, which was on stage, and it was shaped like a gun turret, and it had flanks on it with laser beams in it, and he was actually targeting members of the audience with this motorized podium. And I was so blown away. I couldn't remember any of the music, but I was so blown away by the stage show that I was like, I think I could do something like this. I think this might be something that I can do that's different from anybody else in town. Nobody else is doing theatrical rock right now. And I think that's what I feel like best expresses what I'm all about. Because I had access to all these things, computers. And I was doing computers for a living after having graduated as a computer science major in UNO. And always been a hobbyist, soldering up all sorts of stuff. Video had been an interest of mine ever since I got an Amiga computer myself, and it had a Genlock, so I could Genlock a live camera to the computer and illustrate on top of the picture and just do all kinds of crazy stuff. So, or even grab video frames, which back in 1994 was very difficult. But I had a box that could grab video, and you could take it into the computer and process it, and strange things to have for a band, especially back then. But I decided to use that in putting together a rock show that would be different from all the other rock shows in town. And in fact, I was also in touch with the goth scene, which my guitarist, the guy that was my guitarist on Die Barney Die, later became my first live guitarist. And the bassist too, but he didn't stick around very long. But let's see, he was in a goth band at the time called Revel, I think. And one thing that struck me, well, not with his goth band in particular, but with other goth bands in town, whenever there was a drum machine doing the rhythm, it really kind of hit me that there was no visual tie-in with the rhythm, with the beat.
Okay.
And I thought it was boring, to have people just kind of standing there on stage, sort of looking at their shoes and playing this morose kind of music.
Sure.
I liked the music, but it didn't seem like much of a live show because you couldn't tell how much of it was recorded and how much of it was real.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we came up with DrumBot, and I teamed up with a friend of mine in college who had the same style computer as me. That was a Peg Trouth, and she was a hacker and was into programming and processing video and also animation, which she later went into, and she later worked for Spumco, the company that did Ren and Stimpy.
Okay.
And so she animated DrumBot based on some video of me behind a drum kit.
All right.
We took that video, digitized it, broke it down into various loops that could be played by the computer at the right spots.
Okay.
In synchronized motion with MIDI. So I used MIDI for the drums, just like the goth bands would,
Mm-hmm.
except I had a visual component in the form of DrumBot.
Nice.
And back then, that would be on a television set that we would just trundle behind the drums, just push the television set up behind the drums,
Right.
set it up on some crates,
Yeah.
And yeah, that was very weird. And of course, I had, at that point, had to invent some kind of a persona because I thought my own real life self was kind of boring. So I came up with Dr. Pinkerton
Okay.
based on a lab coat and a wig that was lying in the corner in the practice room.
Nice.
I don't know where the wig came from, but when I put it on and came up with the glasses, which were kind of like the glasses I already wear as sunglasses, it struck me that it would be fun to play a mad scientist and just exaggerate all my worst tendencies.
So his genesis was stage presence. You needed a stage presence.
Yeah, I needed somebody to kind of front the band that would be kind of like a human cartoon,
Okay.
almost, and make the crazy music that we had already written justified just by sheer insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who was insane enough to be singing about giant rabbits or, medieval archers or just anything.
It kind of warrants the visual component because
Yeah.
you need something to kind of wrap your head around what you're hearing.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Yeah, and we were also inspired by things like Morgus the Magnificent, which was still on at the time. And, that had lists of people in the credits, all of whom had the word doctor stuck in front of their name.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with a band like this, it was an excuse to have everybody in the band come up with an alter ego and a character and an accent. Like, you're from Russia, or, your character's from England. I let everybody come up with their own character
Yeah.
and just do whatever they wanted to.
What was your personal music taste at the time? Because this beckons elements of GWAR.
Yeah. I love GWAR.
Okay.
I love GWAR, but we wanted to do something that was a little more all ages appropriate.
Okay.
And, but I've seen some great GWAR shows. Oh, man.
Well, there's just one that first came to mind. Another one that's been bouncing around in my head since you've been talking about this. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Ice Nine Kills.
No, I've never heard of that.
Their show is like a live episode of Clue or something. He'll bring out a chainsaw and he'll scream at you and swing this thing around, and then something else happens in the background, and then all the lights go off, and then bam, they start with the music and the strobes and all
I'd
this
love
shit.
to see that. Where's that out of?
Yeah, my wife and I were in Memphis, Tennessee, and we just happened to go see a show.
Uh-huh.
They happened to be there playing.
I can't believe I've never
it.
heard of that.
Yeah, look them up. They're right up your alley, dude. They were pretty cool. They were pretty intense.
Because there were some other theatrical rock bands like Bozo Porno Circus,
Okay.
for instance, back then that, even if we didn't get to open for them, friends of mine that I was mixing for would, and I would be exposed to that too.
Sure.
So a lot of bands like that around Jimmy's Music Club,
Yeah.
which was the first place that we got to play on a real stage.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Yeah, Jimmy Anselmo was very cool in letting a very green, untested band like ours, actually jump up and try to do something. And so, yeah, he provided the platform.
Nice.
That kind of started us.
Yeah.
Our first 2 shows were in smaller places. Like, the first show was at a sci-fi convention in a hotel, and I was already doing sound for sci-fi conventions.
Okay.
I was like DJing and stuff. And so it wasn't much of a leap, to go from DJing to doing a COG show. Mm-hmm. So our first show was at New Orleans Science Fiction and Fantasy Festival in, I think, April of 1996.
You say it isn't much of a leap, but I mean, what were you doing? What were you doing at this first show? What elements had been incorporated for the first show?
Oh, we got a lot of stuff happening for the first show. It wasn't very, it was very DIY. It wasn't very slick, but we had drum bot, we had automated lighting, and we had video. Mm-hmm. We had a channel of video screens. Back then, nobody could afford a video projector, so we just had a bunch of random TVs around the stage, all displaying the background imagery.
Gotcha. And these were all MIDI triggered?
Yeah, we use MIDI for everything. Mm-hmm. MIDI actually drives DrumBot, the back screens, and back then the lights. Now we use DMX. But it's still all coming from MIDI off of a master computer.
Okay.
Running a sequencer.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, a lot of stuff is pre-programmed. And of course on stage, the drums are MIDI, but the vocals, guitar, and bass are all live.
Yeah.
And back then we didn't have a keyboardist.
Okay. And you said there was two shows pre-stage.
Yeah. We had so the first couple of shows were like after the Sci-Fi Festival, we did an all ages show where we rented out a hall, and us and a bunch of other bands played, and I was doing sound for that. And we also did shows at Checkpoint Charlie's that year and a daiquiri place out on the West Bank. And, just small places that we could kind of get away with it and people wouldn't really question what we were doing too much.
Okay.
We got some funny remarks.
Yeah.
But it was still positive. And, following that, we actually asked to play at Jimmy's, and Jimmy let us. And that was cool. That was the start of, a whole series of shows at Jimmy's.
Sure. Where did you see all of this going? Did you have an end in mind?
No, we're just having fun.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the best way because there's no pressure,
Oh, yeah. We weren't, I've always said if I wanted to make money, I would have gone the cover band route. But first off, back then I was never good enough, to play other people's music. Mm-hmm. Although we were playing covers, we were just playing, the very few covers that we did play were things that we wanted to play, not, the standard cover band list. It was crazy crap like the theme from the movie Green Slime. We picked that up, only to learn that we weren't the first band around here that had covered that. The Cold had covered that.
Really?
So when we played at Jimmy's and we played Green Slime, we got some positive remarks from people in the audience like, "Oh, I haven't heard that since The Cold."
Right.
I'm a fan of The Cold already.
Yeah.
We had a picture of that band up in our band practice room.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. From Jimmy's, where does the band play? You played a few times at Jimmy's, you said.
Yeah.
Where do you play moving forward? Does it expand?
Yeah, it expanded all right. Not only playing at the sci-fi conventions, because that's another little scene that I'm in, but, another little scene. It's actually kind of a big deal amongst people who follow that. And I've been heavily into that longer than I've been into music, helping out with those types of events.
Okay.
Ever since the early 80s with Volcon. And so I was already in that scene. And so basically the band was constructed to unite all the different things that I was in, the different scenes all overlapped.
Sure.
In my band. The lyrics were already sci-fi and horror.
Okay.
And so the venues became that plus the clubs. So we were bringing sci-fi oriented people into the clubs and, bringing rock and roll into the sci-fi conventions.
Yeah, that's
because
a
nobody
cool
had done
aspect.
that around here either.
Yeah, that's a cool aspect.
And we also got to play at places like the Howling Wolf. When Jack owned the Howling Wolf, he was very cool in letting us graduate to that larger stage and open for various people.
Mm-hmm.
By 2000, we were opening for the likes of Mojo Nixon, which that was an act that I really enjoyed in the late 80s. And it was also influential, in terms of getting on stage and becoming an alter ego, a crazy character.
Yeah.
And he just passed away. But Mojo Nixon was a big influence on me and the guy that I originally started the band with, Kirk Madison. Mm-hmm. We would go to every show at Tipitina's or Jimmy's.
Yeah.
And didn't write exactly like him, but yeah, it was an influence.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, as far as influences go, I listen to everything.
Yeah,
I listen to everything. I'm into progressive rock, hard rock, like Rush is my favorite band. I'm into new wave bands, like Ultravox, bands that aren't widely known here. I've been deeply into Beatles, Police, just anything, really.
Yeah.
Almost every style. And that's the other thing. The charter of this band was actually to lampoon every style of music.
Okay.
We were trying to rip on every style that we could possibly cop.
Okay.
Not cover, but right in the style of that band.
Okay.
And so you got other bands out there like Weird Al is very notable, who have done that. Mm-hmm. His best known songs are all just straight covers with changed out lyrics.
Sure.
But if you look between the grooves on his records, there's a really good handful of style parodies that he's done that have not been as popular, but I think that the skill is much greater to be able to write in the style of another band.
Sure. Maybe they didn't catch it, The crowd didn't.
Well, the people who are deeply into it get it, And so, yeah, those songs were a big influence. Mm-hmm. Listening to stuff like, Weird Al songs like Nature Trail to Hell or Dare to Be Stupid.
Okay.
Which actually a lot of people do know about, but that's not a cover song. That's written in the style of Devo, another favorite of mine.
Yeah.
And that's another theatrical band. That's another really good model for what I'm doing. Except that those guys, you couldn't tell whether they were serious or not. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a big put on, They were actually making commentary on culture. They were, and it's starting to get recognized, I think, at the tail end of their career.
Uh-huh.
They've kind of managed to tell the rest of the world that they weren't just geeking out. They were actually commenting upon the cesspool of culture that the whole world kind of devolved into.
Yes.
And devolved is, Devo.
Yeah.
The beginning of devolved is Devo, and that's why they called that the name of their band.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what that is all about. And in fact, I came to find out later that their early shows, before they became a lot more popular and got hits on the radio, were very much like our shows.
Okay.
Where they actually had a script and lines. In the early days, we would actually script everything.
Okay.
And spend months learning a whole script just for one evening.
And where would these lines take place? Are these like interludes between?
Yeah, they were excuses to introduce the songs, and so they would stitch together the entire show into a plot.
Gotcha.
Into a loose plot. And usually the plot would culminate in my character getting killed.
Okay.
And that has always been another hallmark of the show, to see.
So you were like the original Kenny.
Yeah, I guess so. We were doing, though, from all the way back. Like, the very first show we did, the lights go off, and they come up, and there's a skeleton in a lab coat center stage. So,
Yeah.
We've been doing that since '96.
That's so cool, man.
And that's a little bit of the GWAR influence right there, too.
Sure. Yeah.
Also Morgus. Morgus always got killed by his experiments, or at least completely screwed by the end of the episode.
Yeah, folly, for sure.
Yeah.
At what point in all of this did you tie in the Dr. Pinkerton as having his own show, kind of to add to, because it's affiliated. It's like affiliated with Consortium of Genius, correct?
Okay, so actually, I got to take you back a little bit.
Okay.
Because we were experimenting with video all the way back to '97, but the early videos were either a sales pitch for the band in some kind of attempt to get booked, and this is pre-internet, so it was like on a VHS.
Okay.
We would actually make VHSs up and try to circulate that, and we kept building it, inserting like concert footage, and eventually made a VHS to sell at the shows.
Okay.
But one of the components of that was a story, a 30-minute movie that we made. And this is all very much like Devo, once again, because they did this too, way before us in the 70s.
Okay.
They did it on film, we did it on video. But you'd have a story woven in with songs in the form of like music videos or concert footage, building up to an ending. And a very loose plot, but it incorporated some video stuff that we were already using on stage. And a kind of a story. At the time, my guitarist, Jeff King, had graduated with a film class under his belt, which, ironically enough, was taught by Paul Werner, one of the guys who worked on Morgus.
How about that?
So, I didn't know that at the time, but we constructed a show, or rather, we constructed an episode called Cog versus the Phantom, which was a rip on Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park.
Okay.
Which was, Kiss attempting to do the same thing in the late 70s. Jeff was a big fan of Kiss. So a lot of the ideas in that were coming both from him and me, and my bassist too. By that point, I had gotten Jim Fairchild in the band as my bassist. And he was still my bassist, 24 years later. He's been really the longest serving member of the band except for me.
Nice.
And so we came up with a 30-minute movie that was filmed here in my studio. This is by 2001. Mm-hmm. Here in my secret lab studio and at the House of Shock Haunted House.
Okay.
Where we had become the house band.
Nice.
So we would play every year at the House of Shock, and they permitted us to film in there, in that beautiful looking set that they had constructed, and utilize some of their characters, as well as a guest band, which in this case was Damien Storm, another theatrical rock band act that we got to be very good friends with, and we're still friends with Doug Arena and Damien Storm today. Nice. That's a band really that's mostly been just one guy surrounding himself with other people who could help out temporarily, but he's never had like a full-fledged stage band. Mm-hmm. He would pull in people from Soylent and Goat Whore and even Pantera to help him out on stage with his shows.
Gotcha.
But it's more or less of a solo act. But it was very, very theatrical, very influenced by Merciful Fate and King Diamond.
Okay.
And so, we were friends with him. He was a big character. We made him a character in our first movie, if you can call it that, a little 30-minute movie.
Yeah.
And so, looking back on that now, it's like really crude. It's got our early explorations into computer editing. Mm-hmm. This is like right after I learned how to use Premiere.
Okay.
And yet, you can watch the whole thing, and it's semi-watchable, semi-coherent.
Yeah.
I don't think it's on YouTube, but it ended up on our DVD that we put out in 2003, along with a whole bunch of other stuff that we had by that point. And so we had this DVD that we put together after our first album. And the DVD's got like music videos on it, and it's got commentary tracks where we attempt to explain ourselves, and just a whole bunch of stuff. It's got an Easter egg on it that is very difficult to find. Just a lot of the bits and pieces that we still use today, like the backgrounds for the secret lab, were made for that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so it's like this continual build.
Hey, have you heard about NewOrleansMusicians.com? It's a place where articles, music videos, interviews, and streaming music from Louisiana musicians can be found. Fans can join free. Music business professionals can join free too. And Louisiana musicians can join for free as well. It's also the place where Louisiana bands go to network and get free promotion. We've definitely got plenty, like this band. Check them out.
After that, we got in league with Cox 10, which was the local public access.
Yes.
And we started putting together what we were hoping would be a series of TV shows.
Okay.
And we only got 3 episodes in. And one of them was never actually completed because the band broke up. But we would have a guest band, and we would weave their characteristics in with our own and put a whole story together. It was usually a band that we had played with.
Okay.
Like the first one was Egg Yolk Jubilee.
All right.
And we filmed that at Southport Hall. We filmed that at Southport Hall 1 week before Katrina.
Wow.
With some Cox 10 camera personnel.
Okay.
And the tapes for that ended up at the Cox building downtown, luckily on the second floor because the first floor was completely inundated with water.
Yeah.
So I didn't even get to edit those tapes until months later, after Katrina.
Yeah.
But that became our first episode that we really started becoming, proud to show around to people that didn't already know us.
Okay.
Like the thing that we had put together back in 2001 was more or less of a big giant in-joke. But it was almost
not only that, but its
incomprehensible.
function was more to serve as eye candy for booking agents, things like that. Like you were just trying to
No. It was a
introduce yourself?
full-fledged, self-contained 30-minute movie.
Okay. But I thought the point of it was to introduce your band. So.
No, not really. It was a story.
Okay.
It's just, looking back on it, it was all a series of in-jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it only made sense to us.
Yeah.
We had no real, just like a lot of other things in this band, it really was made without any consideration toward the viewer.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're going to pander to somebody, pander to yourself,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we do all this stuff for some crazy kicks. We were just trying to have fun, and we were having fun, but we were also confusing the hell out of everybody.
What are you going to do? You got to please somebody, please yourself.
Yeah, but I think if we had only done stuff for our own edification, it wouldn't have lasted,
Yeah.
You've at some point you've got to realize, there's an audience out there, and it would be nice to get them on your side, reach out to people and not just merely confuse the hell out of them.
Have you tried to bear that in mind with the Secret Lab? Because it seems a lot more structured, especially audience-friendly structured, I should say.
Well, yeah, but that's much, much later. For a few years, we were putting together these 30-minute episodes, and the third one we're real proud of because we actually roped in Morgus himself to be a character in that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This was around 2007
Okay.
or 2008 when we finished that. And the guest band was Rock City Morgue, and we filmed it at the Secret Lab, live on stage at Southport. No, not at Southport, at One-Eyed Jack's. At One-Eyed Jack's.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that place.
And also, hang on, let me think about this. See, the whole thing was scripted and put together around some footage that we had taped at One-Eyed Jack's of Rock City Morgue.
Okay.
And some footage that I had taped with Morgus over at Cox 10.
Gotcha.
He was there putting together promos for his upcoming rebroadcasts. The old man was still very vibrant with his character. He was still, able to put on the makeup, get into character, fully into character, and do Q&A with people and promote his show. He had all his old library of shows from the 80s,
Gotcha.
repackaged, and they had started showing them on Cox 10. Right before Katrina. And so I got to be friends with him around then. And on a taping session, I was permitted to come in and shoot with my own camera on Cox 10's green screen. And so I had this loose script made up before we actually had a script for the episode.
Okay.
Involving Morgus.
Yeah.
He didn't like people to reveal him back then.
Okay.
He thought it was a secret, in fact. But he permitted me to tape him in character doing a couple of simple actions like pulling a plug, for instance, and saying, "I'll get you, Pinkerton."
Yeah.
That kind of deal.
Okay, cool.
With a rough script that I didn't know how I was going to incorporate later.
Right.
So I wrote the big story around the bits and pieces that we had.
Sure.
And it came together really wonderfully, but it took like another half of a year to complete.
Yeah, I bet.
And it was just a 30-minute episode. But it took half a year to complete. And I was showing this off to other friends of mine who were horror movie hosts. For some reason, I've always felt this affinity with other horror movie hosts.
Okay.
Even though I don't host horror movies, it's like I kind of go into the same sort of character that those guys go into. So I'm friends with, Dr. Gangrene up in Nashville, a.k.a. Larry Underwood, Professor Griffin over in Austin, a.k.a. Joseph Anthony Fatinas, and the guy that puts on Pensacon, Baron Mondo Von Doren, a.k.a. Mike Ensley, over in Pensacola.
Okay.
And he's got a show on right now, in fact, and they've graduated to actually getting nationwide distro.
Wow.
Which is great.
Yeah.
So they tape that at their PBS station, and they broadcast it all over the country. It's called Nightmare Theater. But he was doing rock and roll presentations live at like bowling alleys and stuff.
Okay.
And we were already working together. He would kind of book us to come and play, as a mad science band.
Okay.
At their horror-hosted local parties.
Yeah, it works.
It all kind of works together.
Yeah.
So, I never was interested in hosting horror movies, but I certainly felt an affinity for those types of characters.
Yeah.
They were very much like my stage alter ego.
Sure.
Except that I fronted a band.
Yeah.
But some of them also did too. Like the guy up in Nashville, he fronted a band in character as his horror movie host.
Okay.
It's all just part of this big, weird, a lot of it was horror punk too. A genre that we're not really part of.
Right.
But that we come close to.
Okay.
Very often.
All right.
So, anyway, getting back around to this, I had shown this 30-minute episode with Morgus in it to some of my other horror movie friends. And they were blown away because I actually put a lot of work into the special effects. Mm-hmm. We had like all kinds of stuff. We had the Secret Lab, which is a full chroma key set.
Yeah.
Bigger than anything you could afford to put together on a shoestring, let alone film in a local public access station.
Yeah.
We had a flying car, which was my truck, blue screened, flying over the city. And
nice.
We had all kinds of, we had laser guitars that would shoot green bolts of lightning, and all kinds of stuff that took forever for me to edit. It took months for me to complete. And so my friends who were producing these weekly horror movie wraparounds were telling me, like, this is beautiful looking, Lewis, but how the hell do you intend to do this on a weekly basis?
Frequently, yeah.
How do you get out more of these than one every 4 or 5 months? It's impossible. We put out our stuff every week.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't really want to put out stuff every week. I'd rather it be good.
Yeah.
But in the end, they were right. They were right about being able to put out stuff regularly.
Yeah.
Because no matter how we broke it down, for some reason, people's attention span would drift if you wait too long to put out anything. Mm-hmm. It's just the same thing as waiting too long to put out an album.
Memory and recognition too. You don't assimilate well with something that you haven't heard from in a long time.
Absolutely. And it's taken us years to put out every album because we pack so much into every record.
Sure.
But, that's our own self-indulgence. So many years later, in 2019, Now I'm getting fuzzy. When did the pandemic start? March of 2020, right?
2020.
Yeah. So in March of 2020, if we fast forward to that, by that point, you know, we haven't been doing a lot of video stuff, except for advertisements for shows and the occasional music video.
Okay.
But we were putting together a big stage show involving several acts. It was going to be this big party over at Southport with a bunch of friends. And all of a sudden COVID hit and locked down everything and shut down all the live venues.
Yeah.
There were no stages accessible at all. And I was looking around my studio and all the equipment that I had. By this point, I had amassed, a lot of sound equipment, working with various bands, because I'm still a producer, working with all kinds of bands. I do music videos for other acts as well as my own.
Okay.
So I have cameras and I have computers out the wazoo. And I was thinking, what the hell can I do? We can't play on stage, and yet people are starting to broadcast stuff just by putting a phone up and videoing their band, except it looks terrible and it sounds terrible.
Yeah.
But people are doing anything they can to entertain people, who are stuck at home. There's nothing to do.
Yeah.
And these bands are not able to make any money. And so I gathered together with my friends over beer. And at this point, I've got to shout out to my friends in Tomb of Nick Cage, Sean and Melissa Crory, who were the bassist and lead vocalist, mastermind of that band. And my old high school friend, Charlie Brown, who is himself a pretty accomplished director. And so we got together this little mastermind session to try to come up with something. And what we came up with was a game show. We were going to have a musical game show in which the band would compete against the house for survival.
Yeah, all right.
And it was going to be called Live from the Secret Lab at first, until we came up with doing it as a game show. It was just going to be at first just a broadcast, but very quickly we realized that was boring. We've got to make it a COG live broadcast. And so we introduced this horrible aspect of having the band try to compete for their own lives.
What was the reason behind implementing COG into it? Because the characters were already developed?
Yeah, because we had all of this COG stuff already. And I wanted to showcase our own music, which I already had a lot of videos of. Mm-hmm. And we had our characters. They function just fine as hosts for the show. And, of course, I had all the equipment necessary to do a live broadcast. Direct to air, because I was already able to do direct to a 2-track recording and get away with that.
Okay.
And having learned about open broadcast system software, OBS, from my friend Mike Perry, who was already doing broadcasts from his club, the Mystic Crew, the Silver Ball, I decided to quickly learn about that, connect every camera I had, and try to go for it. And so just a month later, we had our first show on the air.
Wow.
And that was with the Unnaturals, who I will have to give, a round of applause for suspending disbelief enough to participate on something that was completely untested.
Sure.
But
how did it go?
It went great. We had hundreds of people watching, and the video quality was rough, but the audio quality was there, and we didn't really know what we were doing, but we had a rough structure in place where we would intro the band, give a bio of the band,
okay,
and then let them play. And we had a scoreboard up on the top of the screen, which is still there. The whole thing had a video game feel to it, which is another love of mine. One of my big hobbies is video games and arcade machines.
Yeah, you're referencing like the font and graphic style.
Yeah, I made it look like an old 90s fighting game.
Sure, it's like the original Nintendo all over again.
Yeah, Nintendo or Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter.
Yeah.
That kind of feel. I was thinking, this could be like a video game. And so I had that imagery into the opening titles, where somebody drops a coin into the game and then you go into the screen and it's the secret lab.
Right.
So I was like mashing together everything I knew, trying to make something entertaining. And over the years, we've just been adding more and more to it. Within a couple of episodes, for instance, we figured out maybe we can like break from the music and actually have a video game being played. We started off with just a game of Hangman.
Okay.
But then we pretty much quickly realized that classic video games would be a great competition because they're all like 4 minutes long.
Sure.
So we'd break from the music, and I would have the leader of whatever guest band we had on challenge me at Pac-Man or Q*bert or Asteroids or Frogger or any of those classic 80s video games.
Sure.
And that would be right on the screen, and we'd be playing it like Twitch style against one another for extra points.
Okay.
So everything comes down to points. And at the end of the game, either the lab wins and Pinkerton triumphs, or more commonly, the band wins and Pinkerton gets killed.
Yeah.
Just like one of our stage shows.
Sure.
Except things that I couldn't do on stage because it's all video trickery. I had a giant anvil falling on Pinkerton or catching on fire, or, the lab fills up with water and a crocodile comes out and eats him.
Beautiful.
Just crazy. Anything that I could accomplish with really crappy looking special effects.
Yeah, but I mean, this was live. You weren't even going back and editing to make it look prettier.
Right. Yeah, it was live. That was the point. One thing that we wanted was the magic of live TV.
Yeah.
As part of the video, as part of the game show angle.
Yeah.
I wanted the audience to be invested in the band enough to try to pull them out from destruction at the hands of Pinkerton.
Sure.
There was this threat hanging over the band the entire time that they could get killed at the end.
Yeah.
By these crummy special effects.
Well, like an underlying plot pulls them in. The crummy special effects kind of jives with the 90s video game feel.
Absolutely.
Knowing that it's live, I feel like knowing that it's live pulls people in as well, because they then become part of something and not just a spectator to it.
Right. And instead of like people calling in, we had both the mechanism of getting the band paid and the scoreboard tied together. So if they donate the band a point, or rather if they donate the band $1, the dollar becomes a point.
Sure.
And that worked. And in fact, the bands in the first season were making at least as much as they were making on stage in some cases. In some cases more.
Yeah.
It was really, really useful to not have us be able to muck with the band's pay either. We would simply put the band's PayPal address up on screen.
Yeah, I like that.
And the audience could click on that, directly pay the band.
Yeah.
And then the band would simply tell us how much they made, and that would go up on the screen.
Gotcha.
Very simple and very clean.
Yeah. You and I, before we started recording, I was telling you, we went back, my wife and I, and watched the Green Gasoline episode.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from someone watching, an audience member watching, it wasn't hard for me to understand how things worked,
right,
where things were found on the screen, what was going on at any point in time.
Yeah.
Because her and I will chit-chat, and then we'll look again, and we're not lost. We understand what's going on. So even though that there is an elaborate aspect to this, the functionality of it, what it takes to make that happen, it's very fluid on screen.
Yeah, and you should see us actually conducting a broadcast, because it has become a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. But it's not like that was the case back in the early days, Oh,
I bet.
There's a lot of mistakes. We still make mistakes, but back in the early days, there was a lot of big mistakes, like, oh, the sound is not on, or the computer is skipping.
Yeah.
Or, just horrible things would happen occasionally.
Yeah.
And we would stumble, and we would learn from them and try to prevent the mistakes from happening in the next episode. But it wasn't always that clean and easy to understand either, Yeah. The whole show evolved over 4 years. And in fact, we never expected it to finish. We never expected it to outlast COVID, for starters. Mm-hmm. And it did, merely because we were having so much fun. Mm-hmm. I had hoped that the show would achieve a larger following than just regional. It's pretty notorious in the Gulf Coast area, but beyond that, it doesn't really seem to have caught on, because apparently when you're using local talent as your guests, these non-signed bands have a reach that extends just as far as they've been able to tour.
Do you feel like that's essential to want to see the show?
No, but I had hoped that it would expose New Orleans music to a larger crowd.
Right, so it's necessary in your eyes because it accomplishes part of your mission. But do you feel like having just local talent limits your reach?
Not so much. I think that, first off, we have a better local music scene than probably any city I've ever heard of, except for maybe LA.
Yeah.
And at least concentrated, you know?
Sure.
Where you've got every genre of music. And I definitely wanted to hit every genre.
Yeah.
Just like the original charter of the Consortium of Genius was to hit every genre. I didn't want to limit myself on the show either.
No, you did that, buddy, because I was looking through, I was shopping for what we were going to watch.
Yeah.
I saw Lily Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, who I interviewed recently. Hello, Miss Lewis. How you doing?
Yeah, incredible talent.
Yeah. And
bands that have gotten signed, too, since then.
Opposite of Green Gasoline, right? So, I mean, we can tell you're running the gamut, and I think that's important. You say that you expected it to reach further, like as in the past tense, but I don't think that you can put a time limit on a thing like this, especially when you're constantly growing. You're constantly evolving yourself. You're adding to these things and making this machine run well.
Yeah, thanks. And, you know, we actually do still make money. We have a sponsor. We'd like to get another sponsor. But if it wasn't so much fun, we wouldn't be doing it. And it is such a blast to do.
It looks like it.
Yeah, it really is a blast. And, so it's best of all possible worlds.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you've eliminated, let's say over the past year, that you felt like just weren't working well? And why
well, there's a few things that we've evolved on the show. For starters, we evolved past having the video game competition.
Okay.
That was great, but we ran out of classic games to play.
Okay.
And like, we even had a game of pinball in one show against Benny Grunch and the Bunch. But we were getting to second and third tier games that aren't as fun and aren't as well known. And so we had to let that part of the show go because it was kind of past its prime.
Yeah.
As much as I hated to do it, you know, we moved past that. We've also added things to the show that I wish we had known about in the early days, like the judge panel.
Okay.
We didn't add that until the second year, really, until after we had done, 60 or 70 episodes already.
Yeah, for the people listening, you have a 3-judge panel.
Yeah.
They're each assigned different aspects of a performance to judge on.
Right.
And then they watch the bands play a song or two, and then...
Well, they watch the whole thing.
They intermittently will judge based on those performances.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I enjoyed that. It creates another aspect to,
the
whole game show feel.
Right.
You know?
It's not only a little bit of the Gong Show feel, or some of those other old classic crazy variety type shows.
Sure.
But it also allows me to pull in guests from outside the music network.
Yeah.
Like comedians or other celebrities, if you will. People that I think would be fun on the show that have that creativity and improv skill that make them good judges.
Sure.
And also costuming, like I know so many people that have got a closet full of Mardi Gras costumes. Well, they're allowed to come in dressed up as anything. Like I've got one friend that keeps coming on as different characters. Like one moment he'll be an ape in an astronaut suit.
Okay.
And he's flinging rubber poo at the camera, Just crazy stuff that adds to the show.
Yeah.
Adds to the chaos.
Sure.
And, we love chaos.
Yeah.
It's that kind of show.
What do you say to the idea that the Morgus show was full of, I guess, corny hijinks, to put it roughly? It's not so much a slight, but maybe in some circles it is. Some of us find those things amusing, and it's why we tune in. But
Yeah.
some of us may be irritated by it, or just don't have the patience for it, or feel it's too crude or something. Is it a divisive line?
I don't know. I will say that, Morgus was a gigantic influence to me. I watched his show faithfully in the 80s and went to see his show done live on Halloween night in 1988.
Yeah,
And
that's crazy. I didn't even know that happened.
at the Rivergate.
I do remember staying up as a child just for the show.
It was fantastic. They did the whole show live. They had transported the entire set into the Rivergate,
Yeah.
set up a full camera system for live broadcast, and we had an audience of they must have had 2,000 people in front of the stage
Yeah.
watching this whole thing go down live. And it was broadcasted live. No chance for mistakes to be repaired
That's right.
or retakes.
Yeah.
He did it with local talent and local cameos,
Okay.
which he wasn't able to do with his show because his show was attempted to be syndicated. But in the early days of his show, he always mixed it up with local celebrities. Like he would have the governor come on his show or
Sure.
whoever. Well, here he was having local people like Ronnie Lamarck come up on stage and then, feed them into the machine to be destroyed.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of like what GWAR did later, much
Yeah.
later.
That's true.
But I found out that, I was witnessing him doing on stage what he had done back in the 50s.
Okay.
A live show
Yeah.
with no chance of retakes and all the local color you could handle.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. It's like it doesn't really function outside of the area, but for people inside the area, it's amazing. It's
You know what
just
though, man? I
perfect.
feel like the creativity, the level of creativity, trumps the perfection.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
you're willing to accept the flaws because it is so creative, and you can't find it anywhere else, and it's live.
Yeah.
And you're willing to accept that it has local flavor, whether or not it appeals to you, because of the level
Absolutely.
of creativity.
No, I
and
think-
it's something that's so unique.
I think it's a dying art. Not only are there not enough theatrical bands, but having a live show, a live theatrical TV type spectacle,
Yeah.
where you got audience participation to boot, is completely unheard of.
It's a rare bird. You don't know what
Nobody's
you're
doing
looking
it
at.
because it's so much trouble.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. And thankfully, we've formulated it into a sort of a repeatable package that we can actually put on every week, or in this case, every 2 weeks. In the early days, we were putting on a show every week.
Okay.
But at that point, there were no stages available.
Yeah.
And it was Friday nights, too,
Yeah.
Now, every 2 weeks is a good balance because I get to do my live music stuff. I can still write songs and put on live COG shows on stage. And on alternate weeks, we're broadcasting Escape from the Lab,
Gotcha.
which requires a few hours of prep.
I'm sure it does.
This pre-prep that are pre-recorded segments that we have to put together that get unleashed
Not
during
only
the
that,
show.
the amount of equipment. I know
The
just for the
equipment is-
people that are listening,
Yeah.
you got a homemade box with like 10 buttons on it over there. You got wires run everywhere. You got stack units up to the ceiling. It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but it's already a functional recording studio.
Yeah.
Adding the video component onto it was not that big of a deal.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Like we got a camera up in the ceiling. It's bolted to the ceiling. That's not a big deal. That's a $50 web camera.
Sure. Yeah.
I got a couple of GoPros here. We got 9 cameras.
Okay.
But when we started, we had 2 cameras. That's it.
Yeah.
And we just kept adding cameras.
Is it, do you have any self-control when it comes to that? Because, my personal experience, let's say with the website that I have, NewOrleansMusicians.com, the toolbar is full.
Yeah.
You go to any other site, it's clean. They got like 3 destinations or something. I couldn't stop adding to it because I felt like all-encompassing is the mecca.
Yeah, but that's a problem. I like the rabbit hole idea of making a full-fledged website.
Yeah.
And like when you look at the COG website, consortiumofgenius.com, it's first off, it's like 1990s looking because that's when I first chunked it together. And it's a rabbit hole. You can go down it and just keep going.
Yeah.
because I've been adding to it over 20 years.
So you just keep adding. That's what I was getting
Yeah,
at.
just keep adding.
Not websites per se, but like with your project
Yeah.
in general. Has it been difficult for you to throttle yourself when it comes to adding things to it because you always want to experiment, you always want to add?
I think for us it's been a continual state of refinement.
Okay.
Like, for instance, you mentioned, and we'll show this on screen, a homemade director's control panel.
Yeah.
Well, there is a commercial version of that available for $300.
Yeah.
What is it called? Streamcast or something like that. I don't care. I don't care to spend $300. Early on, we were doing the show, directing it just from keyboard keys.
Okay.
So all that's a function of OBS.
Yeah, okay.
You map scenes to keys on the keyboard.
Okay.
And having the extended numeric keyboard on most keyboards,
Yeah.
you know, you can put your cameras on that.
Okay.
You know, there's 9 numeric keys. You put your 9 cameras on that.
Gotcha.
No big deal. Well, all I did was I bought an accountant's USB numeric sidecar keyboard and soldered wires onto that to arcade buttons on top of a box.
Gotcha.
And that's my cameras
Yeah.
and transitions and stuff. It does a whole bunch of stuff. It makes directing the show easy.
Yeah.
So our director just presses arcade control buttons in the layout of the cameras.
Yeah.
And there it is. You can direct a show without, you know.
It's part of the oil, huh?
Well, it makes it possible for the director himself to put an artistic spin on it.
Okay.
You know, once you get used to the controls,
Yeah.
you can start getting really, really in sync with the band's performance. So the video follows the audio.
All right.
You know, so if the song is like a slow, moody song is playing, he could do a fade between, even dissolve between 2 different cameras, show 2 different people playing at the same time.
Okay.
You
I
know,
got you. Yeah.
Some of our cameras can move. Some of them are on motorized heads. We usually have a camera op. We didn't used to, but we have a camera op that can take close-ups for a guitar solo or whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a human feel to it as well.
Yeah.
It's not just governed by the limits of our technology. Although a great deal of it is. You know, like we've got 9 cameras. I think that's the limit that we're at right now.
Yeah.
We can't really go beyond that.
But you feel yourself tempted to?
No, I
No?
feel instead, since I can't go beyond that, I feel like I want to explore what we can do with those cameras.
Gotcha.
You know,
Okay.
like I've got ideas that I haven't implemented yet, but there's always going to be new ideas kicked up
Sure.
by experience with what you've got, you know, and using the technology. And what you can do for cheap or free now is amazing. We
Yeah.
didn't spend much money on putting the show together. Like, it was all hand-me-down equipment. The PC itself was like 5 years old, and I'm still using the same PC.
Okay.
It's been expanded a little bit, but it's still like just an old office machine that's been added to.
Yeah.
It's not like we ran out and spent anything. We used a hand-me-down computer, $35 web cameras at first.
Yeah.
Now we've graduated to $80 web cameras. But it's still not a big, costly production.
Yeah.
You know, I got an old video camera out of my closet, which the tape mechanism no longer worked. And I found an interface that would allow me to get an HD signal out of that cam into the computer. So it's now our center close-up cam.
Beautiful.
Because it's got a great lens on it.
Yeah.
But the camera was 12 years old already. You know, so I'm very big on utilizing the resources that you've got at hand to their full extent before I go throwing money around on the latest, greatest.
Doesn't always solve.
Yeah, the latest, greatest doesn't always work all that great.
No.
Especially when there's a learning curve to it, or there's hidden built-in gotchas to using it. You know, like, oh, wait, I need a subscription to work this software?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So I know other people that started using subscription software. I went for the open source software.
Yeah.
Started using that instead.
Yeah. Give us a quick pitch on what they can expect when they watch your show, and this being for people that have never seen the show.
I'll try. It's a little difficult to
I know
put
it
into
is.
words.
I know it is, but I want them to kind of grasp in a nutshell what this is. If people that are listening right now have been viewers of your show previous, that would probably be the best way to sell somebody on it. Word of mouth is the best tool ever. But if you were to kind of encapsulate what it is for somebody that might draw them in that direction, see if you can give that a...
Well, without directly comparing it to other shows, I could say that it's the most fun musical game show you could ever expect to see your favorite bands engaged in, trying to compete for their lives against some whacked out mad scientist host who wants to kill them. And at the same time, you get an experience that you won't see in any club or any stage, where you've got full-scale audio and video production, hopefully as good as any show that you could watch.
Sure.
And at the same time, the band is forced to compete in ridiculous ways that you'd never see. Like challenges like...
The genre challenge. That was genius.
Yeah.
Green Gasoline, the episode that I watched,
yeah,
they had
to play in a
ska.
different genre. Nowadays, we ask them to play like it's a different era.
Okay.
Like, okay, now you're in the 60s.
And that was...
Play like that.
What we're talking about, was that... Did they spin a wheel for that or something?
Well, that's
It was a
randomized.
random.
That's randomized.
Okay, it was a random element.
Yeah, the judges randomized that.
So they all of a sudden, off top, had to play anything in a different genre that was not native to their style.
Right.
And I thought that was awesome, watching them wing it. You got to see a good band wing it and see what they come up with.
And other bands have been challenged to do things like compose a song on the spot, switch instruments. Not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
We had Dash Rip Rock do that.
That's cool.
And they're a top flight band, and watching them play with the wrong instruments, it was like, oh my God, it's pure insanity.
Yeah.
But it was fun insanity.
Yeah.
Other things include, like, I don't know, eating a hot pepper while they're trying to sing, or trying to play the guitar with one hand tied behind their back, or blindfolded.
Yeah, I saw
anything goes,
Yeah.
Anything can happen on the show.
Yeah. I want to make sure that they understand, I think we've covered this, but I just want to make sure that they understand that not only is the whole thing live, but there are elements of the presentation that reinforce this live, like you and I were talking about earlier. There's a chat going on, and it's on the fly while you're watching it. The points are tallied up
live, in real time.
In real time. Those are all honest to goodness points that the bands earn, and those equal dollars that go to the band.
Yes.
So that's really commendable in and of itself. But being that it's a live show, you can go to the YouTube channel. What is the proper name of that YouTube channel? So I don't butcher it.
Well, we have a top level channel called escapefromthesecretlab.com.
Okay.
You go to that website and click on that, and that'll get you not only to the upcoming show, but also to our entire list of 108 at this point episodes that we've done.
Okay.
I wanted
and
to
all
lead
of them are
cataloged. You can find the bands that you like and watch those episodes.
Yeah, that was cool for me. I was shopping by band to see who I wanted to see go through this, But I wanted to make sure that I led them to where they can be. They select notify me about upcoming, so they're notified that something's about to go down live tonight, 8 p.m.
Right, and typically we do it every other Sunday at 8 p.m.
Okay.
It's always been 8 p.m.
That's awesome.
And which is, pretty good for the entire time zone range. But yeah, the bottom line is that it's a live show. So it's the audience themselves that decide whether the band's going to live or die.
Sure.
And if a band has a following, their own following will determine whether the band lives or dies.
And also, I'd like to commend you for the sound quality, because too many times you can have somebody go for a visual presentation in whatever form, and if the audio sucks, I'm gone.
Yep.
I could love them to death. If the audio sucks, I'm out. So you held yourself high. to a standard.
Yeah, we try. I'm very proud of our audio, and you know, it's as much as we can do live with the equipment that I've got.
Yeah.
You know, which is normally used to record, you know, albums and stuff for people.
You can tell. Yeah, that's good.
It's a challenge getting good vocals in the same room as drums.
Yeah.
You know, without encasing the drummer in a tank or something.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. No ISO.
Which we thought about using an ISO.
Yeah.
But no, it's all out in the open.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Hey,
I really
thank you for
appreciate it.
interviewing.
All right.